glad to see some people on the screen as well. I'm Kim Dodson. I'm the CEO for the ARC of Indiana and chairing the advisory council. I mentioned earlier that it would be very nice if Indiana decided what season it wanted to be in, because every time I get excited for spring and warm weather, it kind of smacks me in the face and we're back to being really cold and chilly. And I think that's what we're in for over the next few days. I know we have a pretty full agenda. I'm going to ask Dr. Holzapfel to make a couple of opening remarks before I do roll call, to just kind of set the stage of kind of where we are as a council.
Well, good morning, everyone. And just for an update, we do have some folks here in person. So when Kim does do the roll call, you'll get to see them. But one thing I wanted to share, we are still working to fill the slots that are outlined in statute. What we have to do is once we get a recommendation, it goes to Dr. Jenner's and the governor's office. So there's just a lot of committee members that have to go through that approval process. So it is taking some time. Unfortunately, if we do not have a quorum, then we cannot vote on the minutes. So if you were to look at the Department of Ed Office of Special Education's website, you will see minutes from our previous meetings listed as draft. Once we have a quorum, we'll move forward on the minutes. So again, thank you for everyone for joining virtual and in person.
Great. So I will go through roll call. So Dr. McGrath.
See my mic? Yeah, I'm here.
Paloma Garza. Don Coors.
Here.
Michelle Robinson.
Here.
Dr. Holzapfel. Patricia Hartman.
Here.
Christy Linson.
Here.
Jonathan Krasik.
Here.
Bethany Goetz. David Reed or Alicia Cooper.
It is no one.
Yeah, that's just the DCS designees. So okay. Sarah Watson. Katie.
Yep, here.
Kim Dodson, I am here. Christopher Stillwell. And Lucy Whitty.
Here.
I didn't see Lucy on it. Wonderful. All right. Again, thank you all for being in attendance. And Dr. Holzapfel, I'll run it over to you for informational items.
Okay, within the agenda, and for those who are present, you will find documents on the travel expenses, the travel voucher, and if and when you travel to the meetings, you will be reimbursed. If you have to travel at a distance such as what Patty did, you get reimbursed for your hotel the night before. If you have any questions over the paperwork, please let us know. The next item on the agenda is the ethics training that is required by the state of Indiana. So there's the link for you to complete that.
Is there a deadline?
The SAC requirements are that members complete ethics training on an annual basis.
Yes. We have an update on the 1% alternate assessment participation. And with us today is Melissa Caballetto from the TA team. And at this time, she will share information. You should also be able to access the link in the agenda.
Okay, to update it in the chat for you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to give an update. This will take about 15 minutes. I want to make sure that our committee is on the same page as what information that our directors are receiving as far as our focus goes. I'm going to share my screen. Well, I didn't practice this part. Here we go.
Well, here, let me
There we go.
stop sharing. Oh, okay,
You got
good.
it? Okay. Okay. So the introduction is basically that this is the update on the 1% cap waiver. It is a 1% federal cap on alternate assessment participation. Last year, we were denied a waiver. And so at this point, instead of applying for an extension, we have to do the complete waiver application, which requires a few extra components that have not been required in the past. Three things that I want to touch on for our council is the understanding of identifying meaningful effort plan goals. The meaningful effort as far as the overarching theme of accountability, and then also a plan of action and a timeline that we have added to this waiver. This is the link to our waiver. And when you click on that, it will take you so that you can see the cover letter, the actual waiver that has been completed and submitted to OESE, as well as our published assurances and justification responses, which are components of that. And I'll talk a little bit about those. There's two types of waivers, which I said one is an extension and one is a waiver. Again, we are in a full waiver application process currently. The key highlights are they are looking for us to demonstrate substantial progress in reducing participation rates. They are looking for a plan of action by the SEA, and they are also looking for a timeline of accountability. There's two thoughts that go into the review of our application. One is considering meaningful progress, and that's the data. They're looking for no greater than 1%. They're looking for a decrease in total percentage of IM participants, or they're looking for a decrease in disproportionality in any of the subgroups. That's the progress part of it. The meaningful effort that they're looking for, it really is about the plan and the thought and the action steps that we are taking as an agency and as a state. So some of the things that they are looking for are we improving implementation of our state guidelines for the 1% the alternate assessment participation. Also, they're looking for the SEA taking additional steps to support. Are we providing appropriate oversight for our schools that are anticipating exceeding or have shown on verified data in a previous year that they have exceeded? They're also looking for the accountability at the level of the LEA. So when we talk about how we're supporting them, these are the three parts that we're looking to support at the LEA level. And that would be, are the LEAs providing sufficient training to their IEP team participants? And this includes parents. LEA implements the SEA IN guidelines. Are they putting in place what we have established as a state as our guidelines for who would be an appropriate student to participate in alternate assessment? And then also, are the LEAs appropriately addressing disproportionality at their level? The final component of that plan is, do we as an agency have a timeline that we're looking to hold ourselves accountable on this? If you go to the actual waiver using that link expressed earlier, you'll see the entire document, including all of the links of the information that we have. There'll be screenshots of the information that we share out as an agency. And I believe it's page 16 is where that actual plan of action starts, and then it'll follow up with the timeline. So you see again the plan on the right side of the screen are the 6 action steps that our agency has determined to be our focus. So these are the components that we're looking at in our plan. The first step was that the SEA create collaborative efforts. So the SEA has established a multi-division team representing assessment, accommodation, title is included in that, monitoring data, as well as some administrators, so that we have representation. This is to focus at de-siloing impact. Are we all sharing 1%, and are we doing that collaboratively? Is it, we want to make sure that the information we're sharing is meaningful and is thorough. We have lots of information that we identified. We have lots of sharing that we do. What we want to do is make that a more cohesive approach, sharing out our information with ourselves as well. Training, we're reviewing all of the training that we have available, and this goes beyond what would be required annually for IEM testing moderators. We're looking at all of the training. Are we discussing across the board training on the graduation pathways, on iLearn, on accommodations, as well as alternate assessment and alternate diploma? All of those things are happening again, but the training, are we linking those together? Are we sharing those cooperatively? Communication, where we're looking at how our information is shared. We have identified Google and Dr. Jenner's notes. We want to make sure that how we're communicating is thorough, is fluid, is easily accessible. Are there multiple avenues to find this information? So we're reviewing that and updating that. Effort and impact evidence. One of the steps that we've identified is to proactively collect more information on the participation. Who is accessing the information? How often are they accessing the information? We need to know that the information's out there, but also is it being used? And then monitoring and data collection are two components that we are also looking at. How are we monitoring? Do we need to update our process or our steps in action once we've identified that there's questions or concerns? How do we support our LEAs in that? And then data collection. Data collection is critical because what we report to the federal government is required to be EDFACS numbers. A quick review of that is when we're looking at that, they're looking at our participation in math and English language arts, and our science component impacts our overall state percentage. Where we would discuss in Indiana, like our math and also our English language arts. So a critical factor in that is having that communication, that's a part of the data component that affects our overall percentage. In addition to that, we have found from discussion with our LEAs that there's some confusion or some lack of clarity on how they can be estimating those numbers. So we've got some great steps that we've already identified early on in our process that we'll be addressing. And again, starting at, I believe it's page 16 on this, you'll see this identified with the individual components defined a little further. Our outline is in the process of becoming more robust, but we're at a starting point. This is the first time the state has had to look at these individual components, I think, in this manner or method. So the two pieces that are critical also are our assurances and justifications. Assurances are the LEAs telling us everything's in place. We've had all the training. We understand the guidelines. These are where they're assuring us that that's going to happen. Justifications are a report back from them or information back from them justifying after the window has closed, after we have those numbers of verified test takers, we have a number. It's the justification of why their number is there. We are trying to change this conversation because it seems it's a defense move is how I feel like it's easily heard, not only in our state, but across the nation. We have to justify why this is happening. The conversation is slowly changing to this is the explanation of, it's the evidence of how we got there. That helps us in our discussions, not only with the LEAs in our state, but then having the information to make it a more robust conversation when we're discussing that at the national level, the concern that we all have about the 1% might be too small. LEA information and training participation is a critical marker of this. This is one of the main factors that we're looking at. So just a quick summary of our justification forms. This information is published. It is on that same page with the waiver. It's a little more difficult to read. You do have to blow it up to kind of see, but it's exactly what our LEA shared back. These are the components that are included in the justification, what size is the district, and I'm going to read this a little bit. Sorry for the team who's, like to read slides, but these are specific, right? The district is their program or circumstance that contributes to the higher enrollment. We have districts that have detention centers or residential facilities or specialized classes that would increase their number of participants per chance. That's relevant. We need to understand. It helps us understand why those numbers can be what they are. We ask them to identify what those specifics are that add to those. In addition to, we're looking for the district to ensure that the case conference committee participants are using the participation guidelines. we get a lot of yeses, so we want more information. How is that happening? So one of the things is we get back a lot that there's training, and that's all required as a part of the IEM. Things also that we're looking for are they utilizing an LA specific alternate assessment record review procedure? Are there things in place so that our directors are aware of the decisions or changes in decisions that are happening? That helps have the conversation. A couple of more of the components are students who are participating, what are their eligibilities? Not that we are indicating there are specific eligibilities that make a student eligible, but this helps us have conversations with our LEAs, and we have found that there are some students that are placed on it who are other health impaired or who have a speech disability. That helps us ask the question, is there clarification that needs to happen with our district? Is there clarification that needs to happen with specific teachers in their district? It gives us information on how we can support them in identifying how they've made those decisions. We had about 20 LEAs. I'm still disaggregating this information to make sure that we're getting good information. And the jot form did come back sometimes in big clusters, like they could identify clusters. So I want this information very clear so we can share out with everyone what we're identifying are places that we can improve. So there were about 20 LEAs that had students that had a single identification like an OHI or speech impairment, which is low. We had about 234 districts that were required to complete the justification. Policies. We've identified that 58% of our districts have a policy where if a student has continued to show at proficiency on the IEM, they have a policy in place to then consider, is this maybe not the appropriate assessment? Should this student go back to a general, or should they be placed on the general assessment? So that's great information for us to know that there's support needed in our districts to create a policy at looking at these students who are at proficiency and is this the best assessment for them. LEAs who've reviewed or analyzed their aggregated data for disproportionality is 92%. That's great. We love to see that. And that shows us there's still room for growth in our districts. Additionally, the final components, I think these are the final, are LEAs providing resources to parents. There's a lot of links to the IM webpage. And so this one we knew going into it, this is a great place for us to create more support. We've teamed with InSource. We have several sessions that we're looking at adding to their presentations. We want specific information. Again, there's a lot on IEM, there's a lot on alternate diploma, but do our special ed parents, do they really get great access to what iLearn is and how that assesses their student? How do I use those numbers on those results? We want them to be really aware of all of the options. So that's an area of focus. And then the final one that I'll touch on this page is the LA's special education staff and guidance counselors. What we ask are, do we feel that there is a robust understanding of graduation pathways, including the certificate of completion and also an alternate diploma? And this again is because not only have we looked at our siloed kind of approach in the past at the SEA, is we recognize from the conversation within our 1% MET team, which is that cross-divisional team, that there's some silo effect in the schools as well. So we want to make sure that we're addressing this with our districts. Less than 40%, so 60% rated themselves 4 or 5. They feel like cross-divisional, they're really well informed. But 40%, I'm sorry, less than 40 schools, so it would have been 200 schools, felt comfortable. Less than 40 rated themselves 3 or lower. So that shows us there still is a reasonable need to have those conversations at the school. This is just the summation. Assurances, we had over 50% response rate this year. So we have great growth on our assurances response participation from our districts. Our districts and justifications, we had 97% response rate. We did have 7 that were not able to collect that justification form. from. And so we're addressing that as well. How do we communicate with them? How do we support them and making sure we're getting the information from them so that we have that great information to communicate upwards. This includes the calculation, just so that this team is aware. One of the major clarifications that we have become aware of to make is how we calculate. So when we calculate the IEM, we do it per subject matter. So we calculate for the English language arts, we calculate for the math, and we calculate for the science. The catch in that, which is why it's important, is when we're calculating for science, we've noticed that several districts are estimating for themselves using a grade span from 3 to 8, and that isn't the students who are having valid science tests. It would be 4th, 6th, and then high school. So we have gotten really fantastic information. We have a plan of action in place and a timeline in place. This is a link to the participation guidance that's aware for you. It's highlighted because the conversation revolves around significant cognitive disability is what the guidance states. As a student who would participate in the IEM, sometimes what is not included in the conversation that is the most significantly cognitively impaired, which can change the dynamic of a conversation with parents and other members of that case conference committee. The other final piece that we've identified with the guidance is that we're finding that there are LEAs, and while they're looking at the 3 qualifiers for what they should be looking for, they aren't always including cautions to single line identification of these students. Sometimes we see students who are expected to have poor performance on the general assessment, and that has kind of influenced the decision, or a low reading achievement, and that has influenced their decision. Emotional distress or behaviors during testing. These are all valid concerns because we're starting to see this as the pattern that gives us clear guidance on how we can go back and share out or train on these 3 elements of our guidance. That's our update. We have excellent room for growth, but the state has, I think, a great plan of starting. Our LEAs are participating, so I'm really looking forward to the difference that this plan of action means.
Very good. Good information. Thank you very much. Questions from anybody?
It sounds like you've done a lot of work to figure out, like I love the part about the justifications. Are there certain LEAs that may be driving up the 1% higher than others? Like, are there outliers that may need more targeted support to bring their numbers down, or is it fairly split across the board?
It gets tough because it's the 1% is a statewide. So when we look at, we have some outliers that might have a higher percentage, but they're a very tiny number in the whole state. So when we're looking at that, that's a tough way for me, and I'm on the technical assistance team. So I'm sure that our data and modern people can give some other light on that. But from a technical assistance, what we look for is anybody who is exceeding or anybody who is reporting that as indicators for us in our federal requirement to make sure that we're giving appropriate guidance to them. So the numbers can make it strange.
Yeah.
And one clarifying point, Katie, is that it's a case conference committee's decision on which assessment. And Melissa had a slide up that had 3 questions, and those are built into the IEP system. So when you're in that case conference, you should really be looking at that child, looking at those questions, making that determination as a case conference. But again, it goes back to sometimes the lack of knowledge. I mean, we have so many new teachers, administrators, special ed directors that they don't fully understand that. And then there was confusion when the State Board of Ed approved the alternate diploma, because some folks thought, here's your list of all of the diplomas, then it would be alternate diploma, and then it would be certificate of completion, when in fact, those last 2 almost flip-flop. So you've got your list of your diplomas, and then the students who are assessed through the alternate assessment are the ones who would be on the alternate diploma. And then you have your students who cannot meet the criteria for those regular diplomas. They don't qualify for the alternate diploma. So then they would get the certificate of completion. And that's been very confusing. And we have been doing a lot of office hours, putting announcements in Dr. Jenner's newsletters, our newsletters, just trying to get the field to join so we can explain and walk through and answer any questions. We've done these presentations with InSource, so then they can also work with families, making sure that they understand in order to get that alternate diploma, then your child must, I say must, but it's a case conference committee's decision, should meet that criteria for that alternate assessment.
I could see where the language is even a bit confusing when you're thinking certificate of completion, alternate diploma, and that can have its own connotations for legal choices.
And that
Makes sense.
that really was a struggle when this rolled out. And there are some states like Utah, they have a opt-out provision in their state, so they will never meet the criteria for the waiver because they don't require their kids. And then some states have yet to accept the alternate diploma for this mere fact
Mhm.
because of the challenge.
Yeah.
And the 1%, it has never been addressed. In order for it to be addressed, it would have to be through IDEA. And right now, with all of the possible changes and movement, that's just not something that they're going to open up. And the waiver does not go to the Office of Special Ed. It goes to OESE, within the Department of Ed.
Yeah. Okay.
Another, to address also the data. So when we report to EdFacts, there are certain requirements that we have to honor, and that is that our non-pub students are not included in that. And when we do that calculation, our overall state calculation is 1.25%. That's where we sit over the 1%. However, the state of Indiana has guidance that our students who are non-pub, but they meet qualifications, those students are taking these assessments. When we look at our Indiana data, we're really at a 1.09, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but it's closer. I mean, it's much lower than it's significantly lower than what our EdVax numbers are.
Those are the ESA students, the
Okay.
education scholarship,
Yeah.
because the statute requires them to take the assessment, even though they may attend a non-pub, a parent's choice.
So, but having all of this information prepares us to go to the table and have the conversation upwards, be a part of that national conversation that this means it's time to have this reviewed. We want to make sure that we're getting all the information and that our schools have all the information and we're sitting in a place where we are ready and ripe to move forward in that conversation.
Maggie, I have
Yeah.
a couple questions.
Go, Dawn.
I've always been looking for the words to explain this, and I haven't felt comfortable with it. So maybe you can help me. How do you square the idea? I was around to remember when the 1% was invented, and it was a political tool, right? I mean, there is some justification that there were some records that were looked at to determine about 1%, and now it's used as a hammer of precision. 1% is such a rounded off number that, it is a political tool. So how do we explain that these decisions of which assessment a student should take is intended and legally it belongs as an individualized case conference decision? And the purpose of all of this effort you're describing is to get them under this arbitrary 1% as a collective number. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like how do we share this message to parents? Yes, it's an individual decision. Yes, here's all these things that you should go through in the conversation. But if in the end you still believe this is the right thing, the state just might go over 1%. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. And the outcome of Indiana or any state not getting the waiver, I guess if you want to call it it's not a punishment, but what the feds can impose would be on the title administrative funds. It doesn't impact special ed funds, it impacts title administrative funds. And in conversations with other state directors who have not received the waiver, they've never had the administrative funds be withheld or any type of sanctions put on them. I think those are the outline that the federal government says to try to help with that. But I have not heard from any state director where they actually had sanctions put across their administrative funds. And going back to having a conversation with a parent, I truly would not even approach a 1% or cap or anything in a case conference committee, because I never want a parent to think that a number is being tied to their child. It should always be what's the best outcome for the student, what should be the best assessment for that student. And if it comes to where the state is over the 1%, then at that state level, we deal with it. You know, we'll communicate with our LEAs about justifications, and we offer the trainings, and we look at that information in RDA. But I feel like at no time should that conversation ever be presented to a parent, because that's totally out of that child's
It's
control.
also expressly prohibited, isn't it? Isn't it still in the
Yes.
criteria that it can't be an administrative decision?
Right.
Right. It's just that when parents are accessing this 1%, you can see where there would be like some confusion, like why is that information there? Why is that requirement there? And how does that impact me when we're having these private conversations about my child? So, yeah, and when the parents ask us that, those are the words that I was looking for. Like, how do you explain that really? I think you just emphasize that it continues to be an individual case conference decision.
Right.
Then the second, yeah.
Oh, sorry. If you read the waiver, we were careful to make sure that that language is in our waiver, that we do honor and believe that the best place for the decisions to be made are the LEA. So and also then that supportive conversation guides us in how we access or look for information to make sure we're giving support to the districts. The end game is that this justifications give us information and it is justified, and we have that information, and then we're sitting in a good place to continue that federal conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I would even challenge, where's that 1% coming from? Like, why 1%, right? Like, that's also the big elephant in the room that everyone's trying to dance with. The second question that I had was, you mentioned the decrease in disproportionality. So what subgroups are defining the disproportionality?
Those are listed in the waiver. We look at race and ethnicity. We look at male and female. We included in our information as well a socioeconomic, like lunches provided. I have to pull that up. That's a great question. But you'll see in the waiver, in those first several pages where our data is required, you'll see that in the report where it lists per subcategory.
Okay, and then how do you,
per subject matter.
And then how do you use that when you find that it's disproportionately, let's say for race? Is that part of the conversation with the LEA, or how do you use that information?
Yes.
So one of the things that we are required to be monitoring is, are the LEAs addressing their disproportionality?
Okay, that's helpful.
And so that'll be part of our conversation and guidance as we update monitoring and training.
And Maggie, the PowerPoint that is linked into the agenda doesn't have some of your slides.
That's mine. So I was in Utah and had no access to my internet,
Okay.
so I was able to add those.
We'll send out.
So,
Okay.
yeah, the one that I put in the chat has got those updated slides that Melissa had on the screen today. And then after our meeting today, I'll email those out to everybody.
And the difference are those three where it specifically outlines the justification on the.
Excellent. Thank you.
Are there further questions?
I'd just like to, address as a director, we have historically never been over the 1% cap until the alternate diploma came up. And I would agree with you 100%. I think that we follow, we spent hours going over the criteria, making the guidelines. The person who walks through is Dr. Lindsay Wolf, who has served as transition coordinator up in our region for years and years and has spoke at the state national level on this. We believe we are making good case conference decisions, but I guess the question I have is, we were under the impression that the alternate diploma was a vehicle, so to speak, for students who were kind of 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And I know my husband was HVAC for years. He would not interview anyone that didn't have a diploma. He's not going to interview someone who has a certificate of completion. But if the alternate diploma, so we did take some kids off of iLearn and put them on IM, because they could do the units and get the credits and have an opportunity to have a diploma that in the community is viewed as a vehicle to get gainful employment. And I believe other directors in our area are also kind of in this conundrum, because we have never been over the cap with the, I'll say, old former rules. And now that we're trying to help kids get diplomas so they can get gainful employment, we're now told,
Penalized for trying to do something that's.
yeah, the kids seem to be. And I know it's nothing. I know, I was looking it up as you're talking. I know that you're only following what you're told to follow, but I can't help but wonder. So on our job form, that's what we put as a justification, and Dr. Wolf filled that out. And I had given her some information. We worked on it together. But how do we go back and tell our high school guidance counselors and APs and teachers that it's not for kids who actually have a greater likelihood of getting gainful employment? So that's kind of, once again, no criticism, but that's kind of the position that we're in right now.
And I'm hoping, and I have high thoughts with the new Rethinking High School and the options that kids can utilize to get diploma instead of being in those situations. And I think that's what happens with a lot of districts. The child graduated from high school, they were employable, they filled out that job application, you had to check diploma. And if they didn't have that diploma, then they weren't marketable. And I think a lot of case conferences said this child, this young adult, could be marketable if they have the diploma. And I think a lot of districts did that. And I can't disagree with them, but here's the federal law and here's the state law that we have to implement.
And we aren't alone. Like when I'm participating with NCEO in their community practice, this is a national conversation. There are states now that are looking for models to create their alternate assessment or alternate diploma, and they are seeking states to find out what are the nuances that cause problems, what are those confusions, so that they can take it the next step and improve on that. So it's a national conversation. And again, the way that we have the best seat at the table for the conversation is making sure that we have all of our justification statements in place, not a justification why we should get to be over. The justification we want from our districts is, this is our thought. This is how we came to our decision. It's the support of that decision, not a, we have to be, or we should get to be over. We want to change that. And part of that is our conversations as the state with our LEAs that yes, we believe you should make those decisions. Let's make sure we have all that documentation so that we can be a part of the conversation at the state level. Like, this might cause a problem. Do we need to reassess how we explain this or what it looks like in our legislation so that we're honoring what we're required to do, but also maybe it's more communicative with our parents. We want that place to have a robust compliance with what we're asked to do. I think that supports us in taking those steps to the state, to the federal level.
Can I ask a clarifying question? You mentioned the levels of, I come from health, so I'm just curious about the levels of diploma that you talked about. Can you talk a little bit about that and how this?
So the state offers, and they're moving to one diploma with different seals. But when this first rolled out, a student in high school could graduate with a technical honors and academic honors, a general diploma. So a student who was on that diploma track could pick from one of those diplomas, depending on which career path or after high school path they
Okay.
were seeking. And then we had the certificate of completion. It is still an option, but it's a locally designed document by the LEAs. So then when the State Board of Ed approved the alternate diploma, it has criteria that a student still has to meet. You still have to take specific courses, it's all outlined. But one of the caveats is you need to be a student who is assessed on the alternate assessment. Because what the federal description is, it's for our most significant students, cognitive students. So then that came into play, and we still have the certificate of completion. So students, as Patty was saying, maybe was not meeting the criteria from any one of those regular diploma paths. They were not being assessed on the alternate assessment. They could be a student, for example, who has a specific learning disability, and they're not reading at ninth grade or doing math at ninth grade, and they can't pass those courses. So then that student would exit school with a certificate of completion. And those are the students, as Patty was describing, could be and are marketable, but because they don't have a diploma, when they go to fill out a job application or interview, then they may likely not be given that opportunity for that job because they have that certificate of completion.
And my guess is it's more of a community, awareness. If they don't have a diploma, they must not have put the effort, they dropped out, they're troublemakers. If they couldn't even get a diploma, do we want them working here? I mean, I do think it's that perception.
It's fascinating to me. It almost sounds like the alternative diploma may be considered more rigorous given what they have to do than a certificate of completion. But then there's this cap on federally a cap on those that can take it. And it almost feels like it should be switched, maybe. Obviously, I'm not in the federal government.
I think you
but-
nailed it.
Historically, when all this came into play, it was proficiency is what the requirement was originally on these alternate assessments. It was proficiency, but in 2017, I believe, when it was updated, that's when it changed to an accountability. And the reason that, the numbers are still a big national conversation. How did you come up with 1%? It seems arbitrary and it doesn't reflect each individual state. That in itself, but it was changed because what they found out is because it was proficiency, there were lots and lots and lots of students being put on IEM. They could only count, or not IEM, but alternate assessment, and they only could count some of those. They only could count a certain percentage of those as proficient. But what happened is they had an excessive amount of students on an alternate assessment, and it was not an appropriate assessment for what those skills were. That conversation led to the update and saying, well, let's not look at proficiency, let's look at an accountability marker as far as participants. So there's a couple different factors that go into that conversation and how when those decisions were made.
And what you're talking about, I remember that because we met, Dr. Wolf and I met with each one of our teams and went through every single student that was on the IM, and we took a lot of them off the rolls. So and I think many districts did.
So where we make progress, still say, oh wait, there's a hole there we need to discuss, which Indiana very much wants to be a part of. How do we fix that discussion, or how do we join that discussion, or how do we accelerate that discussion and be validly a part of it? That 1%, what can we do about that? It's time to change that.
And we do have some exceptions. There's a district south of Indianapolis that has a nursing home. And they are responsible for the education of those students in that nursing home. And the students in that nursing home are not just Indiana students. You know, they can come from Illinois, Kentucky, or Ohio, and parents place them there. And it's medically fragile students. Well, that puts that district over because of that unique situation. Also, Melissa mentioned earlier, if you have a residential or a facility that is specific to a disability, but your LEA is right there, they're responsible. That really bumps their numbers up. Or if you are a co-op, because in our more rural areas, there may not be cost efficient to have a classroom in 5 different buildings to serve 2 kids here, a student there, and 5 over here. So many co-ops pool together and the students come together to a classroom and it's cost shared out. But then that LEA in which that that classroom resides, then they report those numbers. So then, you know, there's a lot of reasons, but we allow the LEAs when they're submitting their justification, give us your reasons because we may not know your area. And then this could help us in determining, again, you know, I mentioned earlier about the 1%, and that number has not been addressed by the federal government. But I will say, I have been doing special education for many, many years. And our students, when I first started, were institutionalized. Now they're in classrooms, and many, many, many of our students who would have not lived at a very age 40 years ago are now living. And even though they may have more significant needs, they're in our classrooms and our LEAs have to educate them, which is wonderful. But they still have that 1%. And our population of our students does not reflect that. And in order for the federal government to change that, then they have to address through IDEA, and OESC has to address it as well.
You know,
Mentioned that
Nancy, is it okay? Can I talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I read an article recently about how, I think it was about NAEP, but it's the same idea, that as you have certain populations move out of the public system, a percentage, again, like you're saying, becomes obsolete because you start to have a different kind of student and a different number to take that 1% from. And I think that's kind of what you're saying as well, because it's not a total, it's a percent. And if you change who makes up that percent, you really change the composition of your calculation.
Right.
I was just curious about the name of the nursing home and
Especially kids.
especially kids.
Yeah. It's in Shelbyville.
And if I could give one more, I want to make sure that I've said a few things. I want to make sure that I linked it very clear for our listeners and participants, is that Indiana is not waiting to get to 1% or below 1% to define that we are able to have a robust conversation. We are looking at that because that's our requirement, that we're accountable to discuss upwards and as far as asking for a waiver. But it's not like we are determined to get our state at 1% and that gives us a seat at the table for conversation. The justifications, the assurance that the training is happening, is the information clear? Are we all on the same page? That's the information that we're collecting. All those are components of our waiver. All those are components of what OES asks of us. But we're not, our intention is not to do these things and get to 1% and then we can have a conversation, because that is not what we hear. That's not what we see. I hope that clarifies so that you understand our perspective as an SBA.
Mindy says, understood and appreciating this conversation.
I should know this, but I'm gonna ask, I'm looking as you're talking here. Is 1% of all the students taking the assessment or 1% of your total population?
1%, so you're looking, for those of you who can't see, she's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Because there's two things that I want to address. The percentage is on valid tests. So it has to be a completed and validated test. And it considers all of the test takers as well as all of the valid tests, as whether it's IEM or its total population of tests given. Does that make sense? But they're valid numbers. So if you have a student who's supposed to take IEM, they don't take the test or it's not completed, it's not a valid number, that's just not included in that calculation.
Thank you.
The other piece is in looking at the RDA, that's a good clarification that I did not address. When our districts go and they look at their RDA, that number that you see is the highest percentage between English language arts and math. So again, when our schools are looking to estimate, they're like, I'm not under, and they got a justification, and I'm like, it was science. And they have to address that because it goes into our federal calculation for our overall state, but that's not what's reflected on RDA. That's one number, and that would be highest between the math and the ELA percentage.
You know, I'm just looking at us, we went from 0.5 to 1.3 in 2 years. Wow, that's huge. So yeah, we're part of the problem.
Well, and that's,
I'll admit it.
and that's what the question is that a reflection truly of population change?
Yeah.
Or is that a reflection of new teachers who are not aware? Is it a reflection of a growth in student population? So we're not looking at those numbers the same way. It could tell us lots of different things.
Yeah.
So
Lots of
again, if we
variables.
get that information, great example, we don't go, that school had 1.3, they're a problem.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I know.
So I look at the justification and conversations we're having and where can we, and that's the beauty of this coming through TA. Nancy has moved this to a TA position so that we aren't monitoring, we aren't a catch-up, we aren't not that that's what our monitoring does, but it's, we've noticed, or this is an indicator. That is not the approach we're going from. The approach we're going from is let's collect this information and how are we moving through this proactively to support our districts.
I really do wonder too, how much of it is a shift to, I can get my students employable on this pathway because it's a diploma. I would want to move my students there if it's going to make them more employable, but then, the negative ding on the federal piece.
I mean, I can only speak for our district and I would say yes.
Yeah,
That
that
makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And we are, all those things that you mentioned. I mean, I don't want to say we're small, we're a medium-sized district. We used to be in a co-op and we're a medium-sized district, 7,500. But we have, Lindsay and I have direct collaborations on a quarterly basis. We have flex days. We're constantly meeting face-to-face. We have a 24 module canvas with all of our procedures on. I mean, I'm not saying we do everything, but we've been doing it a while and we're very sticklers on procedures and training and face-to-face and all that. And so for us, I think it's probably a little bit easier to pinpoint. Other districts, maybe not so much.
Well, and it sounds like
Maggie, listen. Go ahead, Kim.
Rob.
I was gonna say, listen. Okay, I'll be quiet. I'm quiet.
I think just in hearing this, I think we might need to look at the legislative guidelines around that alternate diploma to see what Indiana might be in control of changing to kind of get rid of this unintended consequence.
Yeah.
I'm from the belief that laws are made to be rewritten. So it's our law. So we should look at that to see, what we've learned over the last couple of years. And again, if this is the unintended consequence of that, usually our legislators like to hear that kind of thing.
And this council will be vital as we review our information for approval and for input on that as well. So this will continue to come before this review.
Yeah. Okay, Dr. McGrath, last word.
Yes, I was going to say, Maggie, listening to you, I was inspired the answer to the question that I asked is how do we say this to parents? And I think what you showed is that the system is working to ensure that the decisions maintain the high expectations for students and that we practice, procedures to check to make sure that we're not putting kids into assessments that really don't match the kinds of things that are appropriate. And I think that's a lovely way to explain it to parents if they ask that question.
All right. Good, robust conversation. Anything else before we move on?
Quick question, how, has there been evaluation? I mean, I know this is new. And so I don't know how to do this, but like, has there been evaluation of the long-term consequences? And is that why this came in place, or is that being done now of evaluating after graduation of students that take various diplomas?
So Indiana had been given the waiver. And last year, when we submitted our data, we surpassed the 1%. So we were denied. And we tried to appeal, denied. So when we were denied, we have to start all over again with a new waiver. So we started looking at not only the data, but like justifications, the performance, and God bless Melissa, she started in October.
Yeah.
And I'm
Well,
like,
September 29th.
yes. And
I had 2 extra.
I had been trying to manage the 1% because that person had left a few months back. And I said, I need for you to take over this. And here I hooked her up with the National TA Center NCO that works with states. And she really just went wholehearted into this process. But that's why we're gathering all of this data again, going through the process, is because it's almost as if we're starting new again. Yes.
And it gave us an opportunity to look at our lives, population, information, training, what is contributing to it.
I just feel like we're missing an adult population that we could be looking at right now that would help us translate to how could we do it better. Like,
Right.
And I don't know how we could do that, but efficiently, but I think that like, that could help our state. We have a crisis in our adult population, right? Like, we know that, we see it every day. And we can do everything now, and that's great. But if we never look at what it actually looks like after they graduate,
Right.
it's a huge gap.
Right. We are responsible from the federal government to do a survey 1 year out. And we have tried so many different mechanisms to gather that data that our return rate is abysmal.
Yeah.
So we decided that we're going to have the LEAs try to gather that data. Several years ago, when I was in the field, we, as districts, we gathered, we made the phone calls, we got the surveys answered because they were our students. And then the state changed things and we're like, oh, well, we're going to do it this way. And we just don't get that data. So it's so hard for us to gather data to see what the outcome, we know. I mean, we can look at reports all day. We can look at unemployment. We can look at some of the past bills on how to get young adults employed. And we have to get that data. There was the bill, Kim, I don't even remember the number.
1313, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was gathering data through different workforce development,
Yeah.
BMV, you know, just trying to get it. And then we put a list of resources on our website to help young adults, families.
Yeah.
You know, you're right. There is a disservice, and what we can do through K to 12, and then what happens afterward. Yes.
All right, anything else before we move on?
I apologize. I realize with this technology, everyone is Maggie from my screen.
Oh, I was wondering, Melissa Cavoletto has been presenting this information. Yes.
It's my fault. I didn't figure that out until just now.
Did you have something?
No, on the Teams, my name is on the bottom.
Okay.
Any further questions you can send to us at SPED Assistance, and that'll come to me and I'll I'll get back, whether it's a conversation we need to have or email, just let me know.
Great.
Mindy says, welcome, Melissa, and thank you for all this data work in the chat.
Great. You want to talk about our pilot grant awards?
Yes, do you want to
Yes, let me.
get back? So in conversations with other state directors, this is referred to as the Education Benefit Review. And some states utilize this as a training component. And I talked with the team and I said, I'd like for us to move forward with this. Let's look at a pilot to see if districts would be interested. But we're going to look at it as a technical assistance avenue instead of a monitoring. And we have on here the districts who applied, who met all of the criteria, and they have been notified. It actually starts in July, but it's reviewing, so the TA team will be reviewing with these selected pilot LEAs to look at the process of the development of an IEP. So if you're transitioning from 6th grade to 7th grade, let's make sure you're looking at the plan. Let's look at the goals. Are all of these applicable? And is the process correct in the sense of you want that child to succeed and progress through school? This will help, I'm hoping, as the districts pilot this and they look at their processes and they have better outcomes for students with disabilities. One thing when we monitor that we have seen over time is a lot of cut and paste. You know, you have the strengths of a child in grade 3, and I'm looking at an 8th grade IEP, and it still has the same strengths as when the child was in 3rd grade. So by piloting with these 15 districts, we're hoping then, and one of the goals when we're rolling out for school year 26-27, these districts who have really championed this process, then we'll share out during our director symposium to other directors throughout the state. So then we can support them. This is more of a technical assistance to provide support to our districts. When I started many years ago, you know, my thought was, I don't want everything we do to be punitive. I can remember if I got a phone call from the Department of Ed, my first reaction was, what did we do wrong? And I'm hoping that over time, that's got to be more, oh, Nancy's calling me, I wonder what she needs, kind of thing. So we try to put more support and opportunities to the field so we see better outcomes for students.
What's the length of the pilot?
It's 1 year.
What were the people chosen?
So we had an application, they had to submit assurances, they had to almost do a theory of action,
Yeah.
like from point A to point B. They had to submit a budget, and we had the money to be from 5,000 to 25,000, depending on your size, and that could go toward stipends if they're doing the training with their teachers in the summer. If they need materials such as the large post-it note posters, anything along that line. Substitutes if they're doing this during the school day. That was how the budgets were outlined. And they picked their IEPs. They picked their team, and the team, gen ed teachers, special ed folks, administrators. We saw some who had counselors, some who had school sites. And the transition could be you're looking from elementary to middle to high school. So if you're looking at middle, you know, if an 8th grader is transitioning to high school, what are your components? Do you have those indicator 13 components in there? And then we had, I think, one district who only wanted to focus, because they are a large district, on their elementaries. I'm like, as long as you're on board, to pilot, we're good. So.
I would just like to give kudos to Nancy, because I remember those meetings like 15 years ago when we all left ICASE like little puppies with our tail between our legs. I'm serious. And I was told as an aspiring director, don't call the state, you'll put a target on your back. And Nancy has, and I've said this publicly before and I'll say it again, she has totally changed that. I mean, all of the technical assistance, the webinars, the office hours. I mean, we benefited from the paraprofessional grant, the behavior grant, and now we got the pilot grant. And I don't ever hesitate to join a meeting. I have my treasurer join when they're talking, Lynn and whatnot. And it just, and not that I can speak for directors across the state, but at least the directors that I meet with on a regular basis feel the same way. So once again, one person can make a huge difference. And you really have.
Will these be, I know it's a pilot, but will these continue? Because this is a great way to get ahead of being deemed. These are great.
So the goal is, after these 15 LEAs provide us feedback, we have the option in our discretionary funds, which I'll talk about a little bit, that the federal government allows us to use our money for. Because if we see great outcomes, then I want to continue to support things like that. We can throw the sticky hands to the wall all day long. And if we're not seeing the return on investment, then I say, let's look at it differently. I have this money. We need to support our students, our families, our schools. How can we go about that? So.
Do you want to speak a little bit to more than just like that one day where they're meeting? There's monthly support available as part of this pilot.
Yeah, so we have the TA team and we're dividing these LEAs up, and they will be meeting with them, bringing them along through the process. We haven't assigned them yet. We're still in the hiring process of one more TA specialist. But yes.
I could geek out on this all day, because the whole process is not us looking at and helping you fix these IEPs. This process is to teach a team of educators the process of analysis, evaluation, and synthesis. It's not about this document. It's about the process that they are going to learn, so that when they walk forward, they are creating policies, they are creating procedures, they are creating practices. They have information that equips them to do PD for their new incoming teachers. So it's a great process. It's a tough process, and our team will talk about that as we go out for our educators to do. But the thought pattern that our educators will learn is it's universal. They will be able to apply it over and over and over and over again as they're looking at their own IEP development.
What's the you say between analysis and synthesis?
Evaluation.
So, question, and this has to do with and this is why I'm really curious about how, what was the decision making about how they got picked? Were these identified as places that were struggling?
Mm-mm. Anybody in the state could apply,
Mm.
and it opened it up. And the selection was based off of the completion of the application,
Mm-hmm.
because we had some LEAs who left out parts, so they
Yeah.
were eliminated. And then when we looked at their budget, some districts put things in their budget that had nothing to do with the process. It was just like pointed, here's a way maybe we could get money. So they were eliminated. So when we did our scoring rubric, these were the ones who met. Yeah.
Because my concern is from my program standpoint and things like that, kids are asked to leave schools at a significant level with my population of kiddos. And so curious how we are coming alongside those schools that maybe are not doing what they're supposed to do. And they may be the ones filling out the,
Mhm.
not meeting all of those requirements, but how are we still coming alongside those schools and forcing hands on accountability when they're not the ones that are filling out the application to completion?
So that's the monitoring side.
Okay.
So they're looking at specific indicators that the federal government has outlined, and then the monitoring team then reviews IEPs, reviews data, expulsions, suspensions, those types of things. And then they determine if that district is non-compliant. 18, this district is non-compliant for this indicator. Then the TA team goes in and works with those LEAs to do root cause analysis and corrective action plans.
So what my families are telling me, if they're not being expelled, they're not being suspended, they're told they have a choice to leave. And so this is where my questioning of where does that come into? You have a high number of kiddos that are choosing to leave the school that, in my experience, when I talk to the families, they are not choosing.
Right.
So is that still monitored, or is that just they chose to let it leave, and so there is not accountability that they did not effectively meet this IEP? Does that?
Right, so we do graduation and dropout rates, we look at those, but in a situation like that, if it's being discussed at a district and we're not
I know.
informed of any of that, it's very difficult for us to go in and then monitor that LEA.
Yeah.
And it could be a conversation that's not even a case conference committee's decision. It's a conversation that occurs. Another thing that Patty mentioned that I released was a behavioral grant, because we were seeing so many students come to us for day treatment and residential. And, the state has a line item for those services for excess costs. And my thought behind the behavioral grants, what can we do to support our LEAs? Because we see more mental health and behaviors with our students than we have in the past. So we set aside almost $6 million for that. And we had many LEAs utilize, and they contracted with mental health providers, RBTs, BCBAs, working with specific needs of their students. Now that grant is still open, so we don't have the return yet, the data to see the outcomes. So if, for example, I'm gonna pick Patty's
Please do,
district,
because
if Patty's district
you were very generous with us.
got, $450,000, and I'm going to look then at her data, what she had written in her application, in her budget, I should see an outcome on her students. Hopefully, there would be a decrease in suspensions, expulsions, those types of factors, that money was to go in and help support the students who needed it the most.
I guess I just feel like with this school choice thing, it's limiting our family's ability to have that accountability in the school. And there's no solving that. It's just, I'm hearing it at a more significant rate of the fact that that is becoming.
You say it's choice, you're saying that parents feel forced into a forced choice to pull their child out of the school?
Yes,
Out of the public school and into.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Are you,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
concur. There are many examples of where parents are told you have a choice to leave if you don't like this, which, really kind of removes the accountability from the school being responsible all the way to the end. I have a question, Nancy. Is there plans to memorialize what you're doing with this pilot grant, the protocol of it, so that, we could scale that up and replicate it even in the absence of the capacity of the DOE?
Yes, and the goal is, as I shared earlier, once the LEAs are into the process, that they would share out with other LEA directors and hopefully then be a resource for the LEA director who would be interested in learning more about this, wanting to implement this within their district as well.
Anything else before we move on? Right, Part B allegations.
So we have posted on the Office of Special Ed's webpage the Part B application. We got our package, but we don't have our dollar amount. So the federal government said you post using your allocations from last year. So it's open for public comment. It is outlined. So in our Part B package, we get 2 grants. We get our 611 and our 619, which is for our early childhood. We do not set aside any of the early childhood money. All of that money is flowed through to the LEAs, and it equates to 9,700,000, I think. So we do our formula that the federal government has us follow, and then the LEAs get their allocations. The 611, we have to do the formula. We have to consider new charters that open up. We have to consider proportionate share for students who are attending a non-pub school. That money is prorated within the budget, but we have those 2 grants. And then within the Part B package, we have the administrative cost, we have discretionary funds are set aside, and then the remainder of that budget flows through to LEAs. Within the discretionary funds, the projects that we fund through the Part B money outlines. These are things that are required that you must do. These are things that you can do that are allowable within that. So Indiana funds Crossroads, which is our assistive technology, which we are required. We fund the AEM project, which is the accessible educational materials through the School for the Blind. We pay for eImagine, which is the dispute resolution database. We have projects. So to try to address the teacher shortage, recruitment, retention, we have a project with ISU, which is referred to as PASS. And it is for teachers who work with students who are blind and low vision, deaf and hard of hearing. So teachers can go through the program at ISU, get their license. We also have 2 projects through iCase, which is referred to as ASILI and Asset. ASILI was designed to try to get more special ed directors in the field. And then Asset is designed to, it's a 1-year program. It's a non-traditional T2T program to help folks who are already licensed but want to get the special ed, mild intervention, or intense intervention license added to their original license. We fund those. We fund the new IEP system. We also provide a contract with Council for Exceptional Children, and then within that, Indiana Council for Exceptional Children has a sub-grant. That original CEC is to provide supports to 1st and 2nd year special ed teachers. It gives them membership, they get access to modules. It's just really putting more tools in their toolbox to help retain special ed teachers. We have a contract with ISU currently for TA assistance. When we put the RFP out, we had a team of 2. We have 428 LEAs. So we have a contract with the vendor to help support the TA team. We have a contract with Cambium because we're responsible to pay for the alternate assessment. We have a contract with Johns Hopkins University that we pay a portion of the ISPRAP for students with who are identified in early childhood with an IEP. We fund the ISIL project, which pays, it's a scholarship tuition support for anyone who wants to go through the traditional college course at a higher ed program to get their special ed license. When this first started, it was funded through ESSER dollars, and now it's funded through Part B. And we have had close to 900 teachers go through that program and get licensed in the state for teaching special education. We also fund the pyramid model. It is a model that looks at early childhood. It looks at behaviors. It looks at socialization. It's a national TA center, and we have a contract, and we actually have some model schools who are implementing the pyramid model with their early childhood classrooms. We have a contract with IU through micro credentials to help our students through indicator 13 once they are in high school to get micro credentialing. So then when they exit out, they have a little more paperwork that would help them more marketable. And then we fund in-source our PTI. Those are the projects that we fund through our discretionary funds. And then the remainder, which is over 200, I want to say 270 million, that has been distributed to the 428 LEAs based on the formula that we have to adhere to from the federal government. But it is posted and it's up for public comment if anybody would submit. We have to submit our budget once the Fed actually gives us our total amount. It has to be submitted by May 20th for approval by the federal government. So.
Questions or feedback?
Just that the asset is blessing. I think we've had about 20 teachers. We've had some gen ed teachers go into mildest. We've had some mildest teachers get their intense license. We have been growing our own because, you know, it's been wonderful.
Staffing up.
We do have a person, Amy Selby. She is going to be the, she hasn't started yet, the assistant director for TA. She is actually a special ed director. She has many years of experience that she's bringing to the department. So we look forward to having her on board, and she's really well versed in the new IEP system as well. And then we have a TA specialist, Lindsay Chase, who has been with us maybe 6 weeks. She brings to the table, she has MTSS background, instructional coach, literacy coach. She has a different background that she's bringing to the table, which is good.
You want to talk about the child find?
Yes, we have included in the agenda based off of our December 1 count. The first one you can see is ages 5B to 22. We are up. If you look at the bottom, 3,180 kids. If you also notice the negatives, you can see the decreases. So decrease in OI, ED full-time, ED all other, language speech impairment, moderate, severe intellectual, deaf blind, and TBI. That chart is for ages 5B to 22. Your next chart your early childhood, ages 3 to 5A, we actually decrease, which was very surprising to all of us at the department. And we're still tracking those numbers. We're getting ready to do our April 1 count. So we're going to compare to see maybe kids, we're just not sure because LEAs have to verify their data. So what they submitted is what they're saying was their actual count.
What were the dates for this?
We go from December 1 to December 1. And then in the right column, you can see the decrease in the numbers. So we were down in our early childhood numbers by 654.
That actually makes sense because less kids are in early childhood programs anyways overall. And so there's less, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't that, it kind of fit the,
Yeah.
the trend that we're seeing on every level.
We saw a huge uptick after COVID.
Well, yes, because
Yeah.
COVID funds put into early childhood.
Well, families just didn't want to enroll their 3 to 5-year-old to
Okay,
sit in
yep,
front of a
yep,
computer.
Exactly.
So then, overall though, the state enrollment is down.
Mhm.
Like school age is down. So don't know that we'll be doing our April 1 count that we will have to share out at our next board meeting. So
Always interesting information.
it is.
It just it aligns with health information as well. So it's interesting to see this correlate with that.
Any other discussion items? I had one issue that my team had, Dr. Holzapfel, for 18 to 22-year-olds. So we have had some inquiries from some families where Damar and TC Harris was no longer taking that age group and didn't know, we knew that there was like a licensure change a few years ago for those, but didn't know kind of where were appropriate recommendations or what should families do if they have an 18 to 22-year-old who is still in school but is really needing that residential component.
That's interesting because the majority of our excess cost applications that come through are Damar.
But I guess we have been told by Damar and by TC Harris that they're not taking that age group any longer.
Okay.
All right.
We
Like
will
they're
follow
gonna
up
keep
with
the
you.
kids that are there until
Yeah.
they age out, but they're not taking any new
Mhm.
kids that age.
So we need to. Because there are limitations on our day treatment and residentials for beds. And I know in talking with schools, sometimes they communicated with a residential and say they don't have any openings. And we have a list on our website of the facilities, but I don't know number wise, bed wise. That's also a conversation with DCS we should probably have.
I'll follow up via email.
Yes.
Any other discussion issues? Don't think we have anybody truly from the public, right? I know we have people who haven't yet been confirmed as a part of the council. Does anybody have any last comments to share?
Can I share something from the Department of Health? So we have an exciting new initiative. It's called the Alliance Support Care Network. But it is open, it is through IU Health, modules, anyone that provides care support for individuals with special health care needs, is able to participate in this. But in that, you're going to get badged. And so we're going to have a map of different levels of badging for care support. So that could be somebody in a school system that supports individuals. It could be a care coordinator. We call it, you know, people in Medicaid, all the different people. And we're hoping that as many people as possible sign up for this so that we can make sure the badging is actually accurate. Because we're going to have a you know, transparency map, as we like to call it. And so it's really important that we pass that information on. We're going to have communities. So after you get the badging, you're eligible to be in a community of practice with individuals that are similar to your practice. And so you can navigate all of those kind of things. Aligned Support Care Network. And I will send more information afterwards. But very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. Anything else? Going once, going twice. Dr. McGrath, is this your last meeting or will you be with us at our next meeting, which is June 12th?
I can attend in June if we need to. Tiffany Neal is also prepared if she could get appointed to attend.
I
So
couldn't remember if your retirement was June 1st or June 30th.
it's the end of June.
Okay, all right. All right, well then, we have lots of nice things to say about you and you will be missed. So we're gonna save it for June though.
Okay, then I'll come even as a public member, of course, for that.
Wonderful. So our next meeting is Friday, June 12th, same location as we are in now. Would love to see as many people as we can in person. So we will continue to share out information with all of you, but do appreciate everybody's time today. Do you have anything that you want to share with anybody before we adjourn?
No, schools are going into spring break, so they'll be getting a little bit of a reprieve before the end of the school year. So again, we appreciate everything that community, families, LEAs do for our students with disabilities.
Thanks, everybody, for the conversation today. It was really good discussion on so many levels. So take care of yourselves and we'll see you in June.
We have a motion and a second.
Do we need to do that if we don't have a quorum?
Okay. Just making sure I did my notes
Yeah.
right. Okay, yep.
All right, take care, everybody.
Can I ask about this ethics training? I might have missed this before. Are we required to do that to be on?
It's a state.
Okay.